Do they make you smarter, or is that yet another dumb decision? So today I will bring you through the different types of nootropics, what they do, what their side effects are, and whether they actually work or not from a drug scientist perspective. Now, before we begin, there are two things you need to know. First, I'm only talking about these drugs as they work on people who are healthy, so not people who have cognitive decline or traumatic brain injury or anything like that. And second, what is the difference between a cognitive enhancement drug and a nootropic? Yeah, that is up for debate, and it's gotten even messier over the years. So there is no real true definition anymore. Some articles say that nootropics are only drugs that don't work on neurotransmission, which that doesn't make sense. And some say that they were only invented 30 years ago, but some people say that caffeine is a nootropic. And so then caffeine obviously was invented longer than 30 years ago. So yeah, at this point, it doesn't matter. I'm just talking about all of them. Now, the main use for a lot of these are for things like ADHD, as well as things like dementia. And so they're just kind of like, hey, we know that it helps with these memory symptoms in patients who have memory problems, so why wouldn't it do the same thing to the other people? So first, let's talk about the different types. The main type that a lot of people think of when it comes to nootropics are things like amphetamines. And we've been using amphetamines as like cognitive enhancement drugs, so drugs that help with things like reaction time and memory and attention. We've been using that for things for years. Like in World War II, we gave them to pilots a lot. So the early army studies did suggest that things like amphetamines do work well for memory, but then the later studies were like, actually, no, it doesn't seem to be memory. It seems to be more like reaction time and speed, which is weirdly ironic because the name for these are speed. So yes, it does speed you up, but it does not help you remember things. Then you have, all of the side effects that go with it. So yeah, it worked really well in keeping pilots awake, but then they also developed like an addiction to it in a lot of cases. And yeah, it really does help speed up your system, but in doing so, it makes you not want to eat, and then you can't really sleep as well. And so the side effects that you get with a lot of the ADHD medications, so for things like methylphenidate, what we actually see is that it might help with working memory. So like the amount of information you can kind of keep in your mind and juggle at any point in time, that's more of your working memory. And it might have weak effects on other things, but yeah, the main thing that it does is it just increases reaction time. So the amphetamines primarily work by increasing dopamine levels in your brain, and it does this in a variety of ways, but yeah, you get that increase in dopamine levels, that's linked to addiction too. So other types of cognitive enhancement drugs have tried to avoid that system, and so they include things like the acetylcholine system. So donepezil, also known as Aricept, is actually a drug that's used for dementia, and it works as a acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, which is a very long fancy way of saying that it increases acetylcholine levels in the brain by basically preventing them from being broken down. So we see that things like Alzheimer's have a decrease in acetylcholine, and so what we see is that we increase it, maybe that works to help reduce the symptoms, and yeah, it does. But what does it do in healthy people? Well, seemingly nothing. Like, we got really excited about this at first. In the original pilot study, they found that Aricept actually helped with complex aviation tasks, which in my opinion is pretty much everything related to piloting. Like, I feel like everything related to a plane is scary and dangerous and complicated. And so they're like, yes, it really worked well for this. And then they tested it on other tasks and found, yeah, Aricept does not really do much of anything to healthy people. Yeah, in some cases, it actually made things worse too. And we see that another drug works in a similar way. So huperzine A, which is a great name for a medication. What we see is that this is another kind of like herb-based medication. And this may help with memory, but we don't have a ton of information there. Now, if you're working on the acetylcholine system, it can have a lot of problems with things like dry mouth or constipation. And in general, like, it doesn't seem to work that well. So probably not with any of the acetylcholine esterase inhibitors unless you actually have dementia. So then people tried out another system, back to that dopamine, but a little bit different here. So in this case, they are looking at things that basically reduce dopamine transporters, and in doing so, they increase the dopamine levels in your brain, but a little bit less so than the amphetamines, and that's what modafinil does. So this drug is prescribed for sleep disorders, and a lot of people will say that it actually has cognitive enhancement effects too. And they've done direct comparisons with this drug versus things like caffeine versus things like Ritalin, and they found that, yeah, by itself, it doesn't really seem to do much of anything. Now, it does counteract the effects of sleep deprivation. That's an important thing to know. So I'm talking about healthy people, and these are healthy, not sleep-deprived people. So it does help if you are very tired and you need to like keep going, but it doesn't seem to do much in terms of like daily general cognitive enhancement. This is really dependent on what you're actually testing, and it has some terrible side effects too. So headaches and nausea are the two main ones, and like they seem to be pretty problematic. And there's been a few whispers about this maybe being addictive too, so we need to do more research into this, but right now it's not looking promising for modafinil. Now what about the racetams? Now, the racetams are sometimes referred to as like the first nootropics. And this was what we got like really excited about because they work in an incredibly different way. So like we think that they have something to do with the glutamate system, but we don't know much of what's happening. It seems like a little mystery. And we got excited because they do things like reverse amnesia caused by other drugs. So we can give things like scopolamine, also known as like devil's breath, and that makes people basically forget things. Like they can't form memories in the first place. And what we see is that racetams actually reverse that. But there's a paper from 2022 that was a review that's basically like, yeah, there's no good evidence that this works. Like there's no controlled trials out there, but people online say that they're good and they work. So maybe trust them. And then not only do they not work, but they might have the side effects of things like diarrhea and hallucinations too. So that's fun. Now, there are a whole bunch of supplements out there that people say work as cognitive enhancement drugs. So I'll start with the one that people love the most, which is L-theanine, and not great news for L-theanine. So again, we don't necessarily know how this one works. Now, thankfully, this one is relatively safe in terms of the chemical components of it, and there might be some positive support. So in terms of all the supplements, this one might be the best, but there's still not great evidence here. So it's not that dangerous, but man, does it seem to cause headaches in terms of what people report. And then the other ones, yeah, there's really nothing there either. But what about guarana? Yeah, that's basically caffeine. Like, no joke, it is caffeine. And then choline and CoQ10 and ginkgo biloba, and ashwagandha, basically nothing there. Like, there are no good reports, no clinical trials, no nothing that suggests that they help in normal people. Then we have the problem in that those are supplements, and supplements are not really regulated in the United States. And so, yeah, you never know what's in them. So somebody was just telling me a story today about how they took ashwagandha to kind of feel better, and then they ended up basically having a dissociative episode, and they're not entirely sure why, but they never tried it again. So yeah, you don't know what's in the supplements. Then there's a huge placebo effect here. So people think that it's going to help them, and we know that when people think that they're going to do better at something, they actually tend to do better at things. And not only do you have a placebo effect here that's very strong that might be guiding any sort of effects that do exist, but then you have the whole ethical problems associated with this. Like, who should be allowed to take cognitive enhancement drugs? Because right now it's pretty much anyone who can pay for them and who feel as though the benefits outweigh the risks. But like, it is not safe in some cases. Like, taking a stimulant has some side effects to it. So is it worth it to get ahead? Like the brain version of doping in the Olympics. What about if somebody's playing chess and they're on a cognitive enhancement drug and that actually does show an effect? Should they be allowed to play chess against somebody who is not doping for it? These are things we need to be thinking about, and we need to be thinking about the side effects because a lot of people are using this. But now you know at least which ones don't work, which seemingly is most of them.